My name is Taylor, and at 35, I never imagined I'd be standing in my childhood bedroom while my parents demanded I pay $40,000 for my sister's crashed BMW. My father's words still echo in my mind. Pay the money, or you're no longer our daughter. I chose to walk out that door forever. Now, 5 years later, as CEO of a tech startup worth millions, they're desperately trying to contact me. They thought they could break me, but they only freed me to build an empire. Before I share how my family's ultimatum became the best thing that ever happened to me, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of triumph over family betrayal. Let me take you back to where this all began, to show you how sometimes losing your family means finding yourself. Growing up as the older sister should have meant something, but in the Morrison household, age meant nothing compared to my parents' blatant favoritism toward my younger sister Ashley. From the moment she was born when I was 7, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Where I had been told we couldn't afford dance classes, Ashley got private ballet instruction. When I asked about piano lessons, I was told to focus on my studies, yet Ashley received a baby grand piano for her 8th birthday that she never learned to play. The inequality wasn't subtle. For my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a card with $20 and told me I was old enough to get a job if I wanted spending money. 6 years later, Ashley received a brand new Mercedes for her sweet 16, complete with a red bow and a party that cost more than my entire year of community college. I remember standing in our driveway, watching her squeal with delight while my parents beamed with pride, and feeling like an unwanted guest at someone else's celebration. My academic achievements were met with polite nods while Ashley's participation trophies were displayed prominently in our living room. I graduated valedictorian of my high school class, earned a full scholarship to the State University for Engineering, and my parents didn't even attend my graduation ceremony because Ashley had a cheerleading competition the same weekend. They said they'd make it up to me, but that promise vanished like so many others. Throughout college, I worked 3 jobs to cover what my scholarship didn't, sending money home monthly because my mother would call crying about bills. I'd later discover those tears were manufactured, and my money was funding Ashley's designer wardrobe and weekend trips to Miami with her friends. While I survived on ramen noodles and generic brand everything, my sister was posting Instagram photos from 5-star restaurants, #blessed, #grateful for amazing parents. Ashley dropped out of 3 different colleges, each time leaving my parents with thousands in debt they happily absorbed. She wanted to be a fashion designer, then a chef, then a social media influencer. Each failed venture was met with encouragement and financial support, while my suggestion that she might benefit from finishing any degree was dismissed as jealousy. My mother would say, "Not everyone is book smart like you, Taylor. Ashley has different gifts." Those different gifts apparently included maxing out credit cards, crashing rental cars, and dating a series of wealthy older men who showered her with gifts until they realized she expected them to fund her entire lifestyle. Each breakup brought Ashley home, where she'd cry on our mother's shoulder about how unfair life was while our father wrote another check to cover her mistakes. By the time I turned 30, I had worked my way up to senior engineer at a respected tech firm. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, and for the first time in my life, I was able to save money instead of immediately sending it home. I was finally planning to move out of my tiny shared apartment and get a place of my own, maybe even start the emergency fund every financial advisor recommended. Ashley, meanwhile, had reinvented herself as a lifestyle influencer, despite having fewer than 2,000 followers and no actual influence beyond convincing our parents to fund her delusions. Her feed was carefully curated lies, featuring luxury items she couldn't afford and exotic locations she'd visited for a day on someone else's dime. She lived in a high-rise condo our parents had mortgaged their house to buy, drove a BMW they leased in their name, and treated their credit cards like her personal shopping fund. The truth about our family dynamics became crystal clear during a dinner I'll never forget. I had just received a company award for innovation, complete with a bonus that would finally allow me to put a down payment on my own place. When I shared the news, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear, before immediately turning to Ashley to discuss her latest Instagram post about mindful living, which was ironic considering she'd never worked a day in her life. My father at least asked about the award, but when I explained the technical innovation that earned it, his eyes glazed over. "Well, we can't all understand that computer stuff," he said, then brightened when Ashley mentioned she was thinking about starting a lifestyle brand. "Now that's exciting. Tell us more, princess." I sat there, cutting my overcooked pot roast into smaller and smaller pieces, wondering when I had become invisible in my own family. The worst revelation came accidentally. While helping my mother with her computer, I stumbled upon old bank statements. The college fund they'd told me didn't exist, the one that supposedly forced me to work multiple jobs through school, had been very real. It had been drained the year Ashley turned 18, used as startup capital for a boutique she'd run for exactly 3 months before abandoning it. The inventory was still rotting in our garage, designer clothes with tags still on, representing my stolen future. I confronted my mother quietly, not wanting to make a scene. Her response chilled me. "Ashley needed it more. You were always so capable, Taylor. We knew you'd figure it out." As if my capability was a curse, a reason to deny me the same support they lavished on my sister. As if struggling alone built character while enabling Ashley's every whim was somehow noble parenting. The resentment I'd suppressed for years began to surface, but I pushed it down. They were still my family. I still showed up for birthdays, holidays, and the occasional guilt trip dinner. I still sent money when my mother called with her practiced tears. I still believed that somewhere beneath the favoritism and neglect, my parents loved me too. I was wrong, and it would take a 3 a.m. phone call to finally open my eyes to the truth. That call would change everything, starting with a crashed BMW and ending with an ultimatum that would set me free. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I fumbled for my phone in the darkness, heart already racing because middle-of-the-night calls never brought good news. Ashley's name glowed on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But the part of me that still felt responsible for my younger sister won out. "Taylor, I need you," she sobbed before I could even say hello. "There's been an accident. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. Please come. Don't call Mom and Dad yet." The drive to the hospital was a blur of empty streets and racing thoughts. Ashley had sounded terrified but coherent, which meant she was probably okay physically. The fact that she'd called me instead of our parents was unusual. Typically, I was the last to know about anything in Ashley's life, learning about her dramas through Facebook posts or family dinners where everyone already knew the story except me. I found her in the emergency room, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her designer dress torn at the shoulder. The smell of alcohol was overwhelming even from several feet away. A police officer stood nearby, notebook in hand, while a nurse checked Ashley's vitals. "Thank God you're here," Ashley slurred, reaching for me with hands that shook. "They're being so mean to me. Tell them who I am, Taylor. Tell them my family is important." The story came out in pieces between Ashley's theatrical sobs and the officer's matter-of-fact report. Ashley had been leaving a club in the city, drunk beyond any reasonable measure, when she decided to drive herself home rather than wait for an Uber. She'd run a red light at high speed, plowing into the side of a popular restaurant, shattering the glass storefront, and injuring 3 employees who'd been cleaning up after closing. "This is her 3rd DUI, ma'am," the officer informed me, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many entitled young people treat vehicles like toys. "She's looking at serious charges this time. The injuries to the restaurant workers, the property damage, the previous offenses. Your sister is in real trouble." Ashley wailed louder at his words, clutching my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Make him stop, Taylor. Make this go away. That's what you do, right? You fix things." Our parents arrived an hour later, my mother in her silk pajamas and my father still half asleep, but trying to look authoritative. They rushed past me without acknowledgement, descending on Ashley with coos of concern and promises that everything would be okay. "My poor baby," my mother crooned, stroking Ashley's hair. "What did they do to you?" The fact that Ashley had done this to herself, that 3 innocent people were in the hospital because of her selfish choices, seemed to escape them entirely. My father immediately began throwing around his minimal influence, name-dropping his golf buddies and threatening to sue everyone from the arresting officer to the hospital staff. It was embarrassing to watch. This man who'd spent my childhood telling me we couldn't afford things suddenly acting like a powerhouse. The officer remained unimpressed, explaining again that Ashley would be charged once she was medically cleared. The next morning, after Ashley had been released on bail my parents posted by taking out another loan, we gathered in my childhood home for what my mother called a family meeting. The house looked different in the harsh morning light, shabbier than I remembered. The furniture was the same set they'd had since I was 10, and I noticed new water stains on the ceiling. The wealth they projected for Ashley's image was clearly a facade. My father cleared his throat, adopting the stern expression he'd used when I was young and had disappointed him by getting an A-. "We have a situation," he began, as if Ashley's drunk driving was a natural disaster rather than a consequence of their enabling. "The restaurant owner is demanding $40,000 in damages. Our insurance won't cover it because Ashley was intoxicated. We've consulted with a lawyer, and he says paying the damages quickly might help with the criminal case. We'll figure something out," I said, assuming they were just keeping me informed. "Maybe Ashley can get a payment plan or—" My mother cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Ashley doesn't have any money, Taylor. You know that." I did know that, but I failed to see how it was my problem. "So maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs to get a job?" I suggested, earning incredulous looks from all 3 of them. "She's traumatized," my mother snapped. "She needs support, not judgment. Besides, she has the influencer thing. That's building slowly but surely." I bit my tongue about the influencer thing, which had been building slowly but surely for 3 years without generating a single penny of income. "What does any of this have to do with me?" I asked, though a sick feeling in my stomach suggested I already knew. My father leaned forward, his hands clasped like he was about to pray. "We're family, Taylor. Family helps family. We need $40,000, and we need it within the week to show good faith to the prosecutor." The words hung in the air between us, so absurd I almost laughed. "You want me to give you $40,000? That's my entire savings. That's my down payment for a house. You'll have other opportunities for a house," my mother said dismissively. "Ashley needs this now. She made a mistake, Taylor. Are you really going to let your sister go to prison over money?" The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. Ashley had endangered lives, destroyed property, and this was her 3rd offense, but somehow I was the bad guy for not immediately opening my wallet. "What about your savings?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "What about Ashley's condo? The BMW? All those designer clothes?" My father's face darkened. "We've leveraged everything for Ashley's future. The condo is mortgaged, the car is leased. We're barely making minimum payments as it is." The truth was worse than I'd imagined. They destroyed their financial security for Ashley's Instagram lifestyle, and now they expected me to do the same. Ashley, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "God, Taylor, why are you being such a bitch about this? It's just money. You make good money now, don't you? Isn't that what you're always bragging about?" I stared at her, this stranger wearing my sister's face. When had I ever bragged? When had they ever given me the chance to share my accomplishments without dismissing them? "I worked for that money," I said quietly. "I worked 3 jobs through college while you were dropping out of schools I was paying for with the money I sent home. I worked 60-hour weeks while you were taking selfies. That money represents years of sacrifice you can't even imagine." Ashley rolled her eyes, and in that moment, I saw our entire relationship clearly. To her, I wasn't a sister. I was an ATM with inconvenient feelings. My mother stood, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you throw our support in our faces? We're not asking for much, Taylor. Just this once be the sister Ashley needs. Be the daughter we raised you to be." The irony of her words would have been funny if it weren't so painful. They'd raised me to be self-sufficient because they couldn't be bothered to parent me, and now they wanted to cash in on their neglect. "No," I said, the word dropping like a stone in still water. "I won't pay for Ashley's crimes. I won't enable her anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley's mouth fell open in genuine shock, as if the concept of being told no was foreign to her. My parents exchanged looks I couldn't interpret, some silent communication honed over years of plotting together. Finally, my father spoke, his voice cold and measured. "Then you're not welcome here anymore. If you can't support your family when we need you most, you're not part of this family." The ultimatum hung between us, razor-sharp and final. "Pay the $40,000 or pack your things and don't come back. You have 1 hour to decide." I looked at each of them in turn, searching for any sign of the family I'd spent 35 years trying to earn love from. My mother's face was a mask of self-righteous fury. My father looked through me like I was already gone. Ashley smirked, confident I'd cave like I always had. That smirk made my decision for me. "I don't need an hour," I said, standing on legs that felt surprisingly steady. "I choose me." The next 20 minutes were a blur of motion and harsh words. I packed the few belongings I'd left at the house, mostly childhood photos they probably would have thrown away anyway. My mother followed me from room to room, alternating between guilt trips and outright insults. "You're selfish," she spat. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning your sister?" I wanted to scream that they'd given me nothing but criticism and neglect, that I'd paid for my own everything since I was 16, that abandoning Ashley might be the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. Instead, I stayed silent, packing methodically while my heart shattered with each accusation. My father stood in the doorway of my old room, blocking my exit until I looked him in the eye. "If you walk out that door, you're dead to us," he said. "No inheritance, no family events, no relationship with any of us. Is your money really worth more than your family?" I shifted my box of belongings, meeting his glare with 35 years of suppressed truth. "What family?" I asked. "The one that stole my college fund? The one that treats me like a bank? The one that's never once celebrated my achievements or comforted my failures? That family?" He stepped aside without a word, and I walked through my childhood home for the last time. Ashley was draped on the couch, fake crying into her phone, probably already spinning the story for her followers. "My own sister is abandoning me," she wailed to her audience. "I'm literally traumatized, and she only cares about money." I didn't stop to correct her narrative. The truth had never mattered in this house anyway. My mother made one last attempt at the front door. "You'll regret this, Taylor. When you're old and alone, you'll think about this moment and wish you'd made a different choice." I adjusted my grip on the box, my entire childhood reduced to a few photos and a teddy bear. "Maybe," I admitted, "but at least I'll be able to afford therapy to deal with it." The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. I sat in my car for a long moment, waiting for the tears that wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something unexpected: relief. The weight of carrying my family's expectations, their manipulation, their endless needs, lifted from my shoulders. I was homeless in every sense that mattered, but I was free. As I drove away, I turned off my phone, knowing it would already be filling with messages from extended family, all telling me what a terrible person I was. They could wait. For the first time in my life, I was going to put myself first, and despite the terror of the unknown ahead, I couldn't wait to meet the person I might become without my family's shadow defining me. The Quality Inn off Highway 9 became my home for the first 3 nights after I left my family. I'd driven there in a daze, muscle memory taking me to the cheapest place I knew, where the desk clerk didn't comment on my red eyes or the box of belongings I clutched like a lifeline. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and old smoke, but it was mine, paid for with my own credit card, and that made it a palace. Those first nights were the hardest. Without the adrenaline of confrontation, the full weight of what I'd done crashed over me in waves. I was 35 years old, and I'd just orphaned myself. The phone I'd turned off stayed dark on the nightstand, A black rectangle containing what I imagined were dozens of messages telling me exactly how selfish, ungrateful, and worthless I was. On the third night, I finally turned it on to find 137 missed calls, 92 text messages, and 43 voicemails. I deleted them all without reading or listening, then changed my number. Jenny from accounting found me crying in the supply closet the next Monday. I'd thought I was holding it together professionally, but apparently showing up to work from a motel with the same clothes 3 days running was a tell. "Oh, honey," she said, closing the door behind her and sitting on a box of printer paper. "What happened?" The story poured out between hiccuping sobs, and Jenny listened without interrupting, occasionally handing me tissues from her seemingly endless supply. "You can't stay in a motel," she declared when I finished. "I have a couch, and it's actually pretty comfortable. My ex used to sleep there more than our bed toward the end." She smiled wryly, and I found myself laughing despite everything. Jenny was 42, divorced, childless by choice, and had a way of making life's disasters seem survivable. "Just until I find a place, I promised." She waved me off. "Stay as long as you need. I could use the company, and you look like you could use a friend." Finding an apartment proved harder than I'd expected. My credit was good, but landlords wanted references, and I couldn't exactly list my parents. My savings, while substantial for a down payment on a house, looked less impressive when facing first month, last month, and security deposits. I looked at 12 places in 2 weeks, each rejection chipping away at my already fragile confidence. "Too many applicants," they'd say, or "We're looking for someone more established in the area." Jenny came with me to the 13th viewing, a studio in a building that had seen better days. The neighborhood wasn't great. Sirens were a nightly soundtrack, and the apartment itself was basically a glorified closet with a hot plate. But the landlord, Mr. Chun, was a pragmatist. "You have a job? You have money? You don't have pets or kids. Good enough for me." I signed the lease with hands that shook with relief and something like hope. Work became my sanctuary and my struggle. The pressure of my family situation affected my concentration, and I made mistakes I'd never made before. Code that should have been simple became complex puzzles. Meetings where I'd normally contributed ideas found me silent and distracted. My manager, David, called me into his office 3 weeks after I'd left home. I sat across from him, certain I was about to be fired. One more loss in a string of them. "Taylor, you're one of my best engineers," he began, and I braced for the But something's clearly going on. You're not yourself. Is there anything I can do to help?" The kindness in his voice almost undid me. I gave him a sanitized version of events, mentioning family troubles without the ugly details. He listened, then leaned back in his chair. "Take a few days off. Paid. Get your head straight. And if you need to adjust your schedule while you get settled, we can work with that. You're too valuable to lose over a rough patch." Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered before. In my family, therapy was for weak people, crazy people, people who couldn't handle their own problems. But Jenny had been gently persistent. "Think of it as upgrading your mental operating system," she'd said, appealing to my engineering mindset. "You wouldn't run outdated software, would you?" Dr. Patricia Hernandez specialized in family trauma and had a sliding scale that made sessions affordable even on my newly tight budget. "Tell me about your earliest memory of feeling different from your sister," she said in our first session, and the floodgates opened. Years of minimized achievements, dismissed feelings, and gaslight experiences poured out. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that reframed my entire childhood. "You were the family's scapegoat," she explained. "Everything bad was your fault. Everything good was despite you. It's a common dynamic in dysfunctional families." The term dysfunctional family hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent so long normalizing their behavior, making excuses, believing that if I just tried harder, achieved more, gave more, they'd finally see my worth. Dr. Hernandez gently dismantled those illusions session by session. "You can't earn love that was never there to begin with," she said. "But you can learn to love yourself enough to stop trying." Support group meetings happened in a church basement on Wednesday nights. Adult children of narcissistic parents sounded like a fake organization, something from a dark comedy sketch. But the circle of faces that greeted me that first night reflected my own pain back at me. There was Marcus, whose mother had sued him for grandparent rights to kids he didn't have yet. Sarah, whose father had taken out credit cards in her name when she was 12. James, whose entire family had disowned him for refusing to lie in court for his brother. The first few months are the hardest, Sarah told me after meeting, both of us clutching coffee in paper cups. You'll want to break no contact about 1,000 times. You'll convince yourself you overreacted, that maybe they've changed, that family is family. Don't do it. Write letters you'll never send, scream into pillows, call someone from group. But don't break no contact.
They haven't changed.
They never do. She was right about the urge to reach out. Some nights, I'd stare at my phone, fingers hovering over the keypad, imagining dialing my mother's number. Maybe if I explained better, maybe if I apologized for leaving so dramatically, maybe if I offered a payment plan for Ashley's damages. The what-ifs tortured me until I learned to recognize them as trauma responses, not genuine desires. I wasn't missing my actual family. I was mourning the family I'd wished they were. Extended family members found ways around my changed number. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered I existed. Their messages, forwarded through work email or LinkedIn, all carried the same theme. Family is everything. You only get one mother. Ashley made a mistake, but she's still your sister. Blood is thicker than water. None of them offered to help pay Ashley's debt, I noticed. Family was everything when it came to my wallet, not theirs. The worst was Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who'd always been kind to me growing up. Her email was longer than the others, filled with memories of family gatherings and pleas for reconciliation. Your mother is heartbroken, she wrote. She cries every day. Is your pride really worth destroying your family? I stared at that email for hours before Jenny helped me craft a response. My family destroyed themselves. I just stopped enabling it. Building new friendships felt like learning a foreign language. Jenny introduced me to her circle, women who'd chosen careers over conventional families, who understood that DNA didn't obligate you to accept abuse. They welcomed me with a warmth that felt genuine, celebrating my small victories like they mattered. When I finally saved enough to buy a bed instead of sleeping on an air mattress, they threw me a housewarming party in my tiny studio, complete with a cake shaped like a mattress. Work gradually improved as therapy gave me tools to manage my anxiety and grief. The project I'd been struggling with suddenly clicked, and I found myself coding with the clarity that had earned me my promotion. David noticed, assigning me to a high-visibility project that would put me in front of senior management. I knew you'd bounce back, he said. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The presentation to the C-suite should have terrified me. 6 months earlier, it would have. But standing in that boardroom, explaining my innovative solution to our data processing bottleneck, I felt the confidence that came from surviving my worst fear. I'd lost my family and lived. A room full of executives in expensive suits couldn't hurt me worse than my mother's last words already had. Brilliant work, Taylor, the CEO said afterward, shaking my hand with genuine enthusiasm. This could save us millions annually. I want you leading the implementation team. The promotion came with a substantial raise and stock options. I celebrated quietly with Jenny and my support group, finally able to move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. The night I signed the lease, I stood in my empty living room and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd built this myself, without my family's help or approval. 6 months after the ultimatum, I finally felt stable. I had a home that didn't require pepper spray to reach the front door, a job that challenged and rewarded me, friends who knew my worth had nothing to do with my usefulness, and a therapist who helped me understand that my family's inability to love me said nothing about my lovability. I was learning to cook for one without feeling lonely, to celebrate my achievements without seeking validation, to exist without apologizing for the space I took up. One night, scrolling through social media on an account my family didn't know about, I saw Ashley's post about her court date. She'd gotten community service and probation, no jail time. The comments were full of congratulations on her strength and resilience. #warrior. #blessed. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a blank space where my sister used to live in my heart. I closed the app and made dinner, humming along to music in my small but mine kitchen, free in ways I was only beginning to understand. 3 months into my new life, just as I was finding my rhythm, Aunt Martha called from a number I didn't recognize. I'd been grocery shopping, debating between generic and name-brand pasta, when her voice shattered my carefully constructed peace. "Taylor, don't hang up. I'm not calling to lecture you. I thought you should know what they're saying about you." My hand tightened on the phone. Pasta forgotten. "I don't need to know, Martha. I'm trying to move forward." "They're telling everyone you abandoned them during a medical crisis," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Your mother's been posting on Facebook about her ungrateful daughter who left when Ashley was hospitalized with trauma-induced anxiety. She's got half the town believing you're some kind of monster who chose money over your sister's mental health." The words hit like physical blows, each one a fresh wound. Of course they'd rewritten history. Of course I was the villain in their story. I thanked Martha for the information and hung up, immediately blocking the number. But the damage was done. The careful distance I'd created crumbled as I imagined all the people I'd grown up with reading my mother's posts, clucking their tongues at my selfishness. It shouldn't matter what people I'd never see again thought of me, but it did. The unfairness of it all made me want to scream in the cereal aisle. A week later, my bank called about suspicious activity on an old savings account I'd forgotten to close, one my parents had co-signed when I was 16. "There have been several large withdrawals over the past month," the representative explained. "Did you authorize these?" My stomach dropped as she listed the amounts. 3,000 here, 5,000 there. The account nearly drained. My parents had been helping themselves to money I'd saved from high school jobs, birthday gifts, every penny I'd scraped together as a teenager. The bank investigation revealed what I'd suspected. My parents had forged my signature on the withdrawal slips. The security footage showed my mother at the teller window, chatting pleasantly as she stole from her own daughter. "This constitutes fraud," the investigator told me. "You have grounds to press charges." I sat in his office, staring at the grainy footage of my mother's crime, and felt something break inside me that I hadn't realized was still whole. Jenny found me that night sitting on my kitchen floor, surrounded by bank statements and legal documents. "They stole from me," I said numbly. "Even after everything, they're still taking from me." She sat beside me, not trying to fix it, just being present. "What are you going to do?" she asked after a while. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants them to face consequences. Part of me just wants it to stop. The decision to pursue legal action didn't come easily. Dr. Hernandez spent 3 sessions helping me work through the guilt. "Protecting yourself isn't revenge," she reminded me. "They chose to commit a crime. You're choosing to stop being a victim." Still, signing the papers to press charges felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. My hand shook as I wrote my name, formally accusing my parents of fraud. That's when the real harassment began. Ashley, apparently taking a break from her trauma-induced anxiety, mobilized her small but dedicated following against me. My LinkedIn profile was flooded with messages calling me heartless. Coworkers received DMs about what kind of person I really was. Someone posted my work email in a Facebook group dedicated to shaming bad family members, and my inbox filled with vitriol from strangers who'd heard one side of a story and appointed themselves judge and jury. HR called me in on a Tuesday morning. I sat across from Margaret, the head of human resources, certain this was the end of my career. "We've been receiving some concerning messages about you," she began, and I felt my world tilting. "Obviously, we don't make employment decisions based on anonymous social media harassment," she continued, and I could breathe again. "But we wanted to make sure you're safe and to let you know we're implementing additional security measures for your protection." The company's support stunned me. They blocked the harasser's emails, increased security in the parking garage, and even offered to pursue legal action against anyone making threats. "We value our employees," Margaret said firmly. Whatever is happening in your personal life, you're safe here. I cried in the bathroom afterward, overwhelmed by kindness from relative strangers while my own family tried to destroy me. The private investigator showed up at my favorite coffee shop on a Thursday evening. I'd been reviewing code on my laptop, feeling almost normal, when a man in a cheap suit sat down across from me uninvited. Miss Morrison? I've been hired to locate you regarding a family matter. My blood turned to ice. They'd hired someone to find me. The violation of it, the absolute refusal to respect my boundaries, made me dizzy with rage. I'm calling the police, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. He raised his hands placatingly. That's not necessary. I'm just here to deliver a message and confirm your current address. I did call the police, my hands trembling as I dialed. 2 officers arrived within minutes, and the PI scattered like the cockroach he was. He was just doing his job, one officer said, but he took my statement seriously. You might want to consider a restraining order. The restraining order process was a bureaucratic nightmare that required me to relive every painful detail of why I feared my family. The lawyer I hired, recommended by someone in my support group, was a petite woman named Grace, who'd clearly seen too many cases like mine. Document everything, she instructed. Every contact attempt, every online post, every flying monkey they send. Family court judges can be reluctant to grant restraining orders against parents unless we show a clear pattern of harassment. As we built my case, more financial bombs exploded. Credit monitoring alerts showed new accounts opened in my name, cards I'd never applied for maxed out with charges for designer goods and cash advances. The address on the accounts was my parents' house. They'd used my social security number, my birth date, personal information only parents would have, to steal my identity as casually as they'd stolen my childhood peace. This is actually helpful for our case, Grace said grimly, as we added identity theft charges to the fraud charges. No judge can ignore this level of financial abuse. I stared at the credit reports showing thousands in debt I didn't create and felt a strange detachment. These people who'd raised me, who were supposed to protect me, were systematically trying to ruin me. It was so absurd it almost felt like someone else's life. Claire reached out through Instagram, one of the few people from my old life I hadn't blocked. We'd been best friends in high school before drifting apart in college, but her message seemed genuinely concerned. Hey Taylor, I heard about everything with your family. I'm so sorry you're going through this. If you need anything, I'm here. I was desperate enough for connection to my past that I responded, and we met for coffee near my office. I actually need to tell you something, she said after we'd caught up on safer topics. Your mom came to me a few months ago before all this happened. She said you were going through some mental health stuff and might reach out for money. She asked me to let her know if you did, because they were trying to get you help. My stomach turned. Claire, I wasn't having mental health issues. That was right when I got promoted. They were laying groundwork to discredit me. Claire's face went pale as the implications hit her. Oh my God. She was so convincing, Taylor. She cried about how worried they were, how you'd been acting erratic. I gave her $2,000 for your treatment fund. She said they were saving to get you help but didn't have enough yet. Another victim of my mother's tears, another person scammed using my name. I wondered how many others there were, how many people had handed over money thinking they were helping me. I'm going to need you to write that down, I said quietly. For the lawyers. I'm so sorry they did this to you too. Claire was angry now, the manipulation clicking into place. She played me. God. Your mother actually sat in my living room, drank my tea, and conned me out of $2,000 with fake tears about her mentally ill daughter. Who does that? Someone who'd had 35 years of practice, I thought, but didn't say. The final straw came when Jenny showed me Ashley's latest Instagram video. I'd blocked her everywhere, but people sent Jenny screenshots, unable to resist the train wreck. In the video, Ashley sat in what looked like our parents' living room, face perfectly made up for tragedy. I just want to address the lies being spread about my family, she began, and I knew I should stop watching but couldn't. My sister is sick. She's having some kind of breakdown, and instead of getting help, She's lashing out at the people who love her most. She went on for 10 minutes, painting a picture of a mentally unstable woman who'd invented abuse to justify abandoning her family. According to Ashley, I'd always been jealous of her success, had tried to sabotage her influencer career, and had finally snapped when she'd gotten engaged to a wonderful man. The engagement was news to me, as was her success or my sabotage. The comment section was full of support for poor Ashley, dealing with such a difficult sister. Several threatened to find me and teach me a lesson about family loyalty. "She's good," Jenny said grudgingly as we watched. "I mean, she's evil, but she's good at it. If I didn't know the truth, I might believe her." That was the problem. Ashley had inherited our mother's ability to cry on cue, to play victim so convincingly that reality became negotiable. I reported the video for harassment, knowing it wouldn't matter. The court of public opinion had already ruled against me. Grace called that evening with mixed news. "The criminal charges for fraud and identity theft have been filed. Your parents will be served tomorrow. But the judge wants to see more evidence of ongoing harassment before granting the restraining order. Document everything, Taylor. Every single contact attempt. We need to show a pattern that proves they won't stop voluntarily." I hung up and sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built away from them. Tomorrow, my parents would be served with criminal charges. Tomorrow, the fake illness narrative would evolve into something worse. Tomorrow, the family that had already taken so much would find new ways to punish me for the crime of existing without them. But tonight, I had work in the morning, code to review, a life to live. I made dinner, watched a mindless TV show, and went to bed in sheets I'd bought with money I'd earned at a job they'd never bothered to understand. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and they couldn't take that away no matter how hard they tried. The morning my parents were served with criminal charges, I was in the middle of the most important presentation of my career. My phone, silenced in my bag, filled with messages I wouldn't see until later. David had chosen me to present our innovative solution directly to the board of directors, a room full of people who could change my professional trajectory with a single nod. As I explained how our new data processing algorithm could save the company millions annually, somewhere across town, my parents were learning that their daughter had formally accused them of fraud and identity theft. The presentation was flawless. Months of work condensed into 30 minutes of clear, compelling arguments backed by solid data. The board members leaned forward, engaged and asking the kind of questions that meant they were seriously considering implementation. Our CEO, Richard Blackstone, interrupted his notorious poker face with something approaching a smile. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need," he said. "Taylor, I want you heading up the implementation team. David, make sure she has whatever resources she needs." I floated back to my desk on a high that crashed the moment I checked my phone. 47 missed calls. My lawyer, my parents' lawyer, numbers I didn't recognize, even a text from Jenny that just said, "Call me ASAP. You're okay. Just call." I stepped outside, autumn air sharp against my flushed cheeks, and called Grace first. "They've been served," she said without preamble. "And they didn't take it well. Your father apparently made some threats in front of the process server. I need you to be extra careful for the next few days." The threats were specific enough that Grace insisted I file a police report. "He said he'd make you pay for destroying the family," she told me, reading from the process server statement. "That you'd learn what happens to ungrateful daughters." The server felt threatened enough to call for police backup. I stood in the parking lot of my office building, watching normal people live normal lives, and wondered when my existence had become a legal drama. Jenny met me for lunch, sliding into the booth with her signature maternal energy. "So, terrible morning but amazing presentation?" I nodded, picking at my salad. "The board loved it. Richard wants me leading implementation." Jenny hooped loud enough to turn heads. "That's huge. That's life-changing money, Taylor. Stock options, bonuses, the works." She was right. If I succeeded, and I knew I would, this project would set me up financially for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's attempts to drain me financially were happening just as my career was skyrocketing. Ashley's response to the criminal charges was predictably dramatic. A series of Instagram stories documented her trauma at learning her mentally ill sister had attacked their parents. She filmed herself crying in a courthouse bathroom, though I suspected she was there for her own legal troubles, not our parents. "I just want my sister back," she sobbed to her phone. The real Taylor, not this person consumed by greed and jealousy. The comments were divided now, some still supporting her, others beginning to question the constant drama. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned and impressed my colleagues. The implementation team I assembled was brilliant, diverse, and drama-free, everything my family wasn't. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by takeout and the shared excitement of building something revolutionary. The algorithm wasn't just about data processing. It was about predicting and preventing system failures before they occurred. Ironic, considering I'd failed to predict my own family's systematic attempt to destroy me. 3 weeks into implementation, Richard called me into his office. "I've been watching your work," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Not just this project, but your entire trajectory here. You have the kind of innovative thinking we need in leadership. Have you ever considered starting your own venture?" My heart stopped. "What?" He smiled, the expression transforming his usually stern face. "We're launching an internal incubator program. Funding and support for employees to develop their own startups within our ecosystem. I want you to be our first participant." The opportunity was beyond my wildest dreams. My own startup, funded by the company with access to their resources and clients. "The catch," Richard continued, "is that we'd want a 60% stake initially, though you have buyback options based on performance. You'd maintain creative control and run it as CEO. Interested? Interested was an understatement. I was being offered the chance to build something from nothing, to prove that I was more than my family's discarded daughter. That night, I called Dr. Hernandez for an emergency session. "This feels too good to be true," I confessed. "Like maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe my family was right about me being selfish and grabbing for more than my share." She let me ramble before asking quietly, "Whose voice is that, Taylor? Because it doesn't sound like yours." She was right. It was my mother's voice, my father's disappointment, Ashley's entitlement, all living rent-free in my head. "You earned this," Dr. Hernandez reminded me, "through talent, hard work, and innovation. Your family's inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it." I accepted Richard's offer the next morning, signing papers that made me CEO of a subsidiary focused on predictive analytics for system security. Jenny literally screamed when I told her, then immediately started planning my CEO wardrobe. "No more clearance rack blazers," she declared. "You're a founder now. You need to look the part." The shopping trip was surreal, buying clothes that cost more than my old rent, but Jenny was right. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who belonged in boardrooms, someone whose ideas mattered. The legal proceedings against my parents moved forward slowly, but inevitably. They'd hired a lawyer who specialized in family reconciliation through legal mediation, which apparently meant trying to guilt me into dropping charges. Their first settlement offer was insulting. They'd repay the stolen money over 10 years, with no admission of wrongdoing, if I agreed to family counseling. Grace laughed when she read it to me. "They want you to pay for therapy with the people who necessitate your therapy. That's bold, even for narcissists." We countered with demands for immediate repayment, restraining orders, and public acknowledgement of the fraud. Their lawyer called Grace to express shock at our aggressive stance. "She's their daughter," he said, as if that excused felony theft. "Exactly," Grace replied. "Which makes their crimes worse, not better." I loved her more in that moment than I'd ever loved my actual family. While my parents scrambled to avoid consequences, my startup took shape with stunning speed. I hired carefully, building a team of brilliant misfits who understood that innovation came from diverse perspectives. My first hire was Marcus from Support Group, a brilliant programmer whose family had disowned him for refusing to join the family cult. Literally. "Toxic family survivors make the best employees," he said during his interview. "We show up, We work hard, and we don't create unnecessary drama because we've had enough for several lifetimes. The product we developed was elegant in its simplicity. An AI system that monitored database health and predicted failures up to 72 hours before they occurred. It could save companies millions in downtime and data loss. Our first client was within the parent company, but word spread quickly. By month 3, we had inquiries from Fortune 500 companies. By month 6, we were profitable. The financial press started calling us the startup to watch, and my name appeared in articles about innovative young CEOs. The morning TechCrunch featured our company. Ashley posted a video claiming I'd stolen her business idea. According to her revisionist history, she'd conceived of predictive analytics while studying business. News to everyone who knew she'd dropped out of 3 colleges without completing a single business course. My sister was always jealous of my creativity, she told her dwindling audience. Now she's built an empire on my ideas while our family struggles to survive her vindictive legal attacks. The video backfired spectacularly. Tech Twitter, not known for its kindness, tore her claims apart within hours. Actual engineers posted detailed explanations of why her claims were impossible. Someone found her old posts about wanting to be a fashion influencer, then a chef, then a lifestyle guru, but never once mentioning tech or business. The hashtag Ashley the Analyst trended briefly, full of memes mocking her transparent lies. It was petty of me to enjoy it, but I did. My parents' criminal trial was set for spring, but the civil proceedings moved faster. The judge in the identity theft case was unsympathetic to their claims of parental privilege. Being someone's parent doesn't give you the right to destroy their credit, she said sharply. In fact, it makes the betrayal worse. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff for all damages plus punitive awards. The number made my parents' lawyer visibly pale. With interest and penalties, they owed me nearly $100,000. We'll never see that money, Grace warned me. They've probably hidden what assets they have left. But the judgment follows them. No loans, no credit cards, no financial fresh starts until it's paid. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the paper trail that proved I wasn't crazy, wasn't ungrateful, wasn't the villain in their story. I had legal documentation that they were the ones who'd wronged me. The night before my company's official launch party, I stood in my new apartment, a real one-bedroom in a building with a doorman and everything, and felt the weight of the journey. 6 months ago, I'd been sleeping on Jenny's couch, checking my bank balance obsessively, afraid to spend money on name-brand groceries. Now I was CEO of a funded startup, living in an apartment my parents could never have afforded, surrounded by people who valued me for my mind and character rather than my usefulness. My phone rang, an unknown number I almost didn't answer. Taylor. The voice was familiar but wrong, aged and uncertain. It's Mom. My finger hovered over the end button, but curiosity won. How did you get this number? I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. That doesn't matter. I saw the article about your company. My daughter, a CEO. I'm so proud of you. The words I'd waited 35 years to hear now sounded like noise. Are you proud enough to stop committing crimes against me? The silence stretched before she hung up. It was the last time we'd speak. The launch party for my startup was held at a rooftop venue overlooking the city, a far cry from equality in where I'd spent my first nights of freedom. Tech journalists, potential investors, and industry leaders mingled while my team demonstrated our predictive analytics platform on massive screens. I wore a designer dress Jenny had insisted on, midnight blue that made me look like I belonged in this world of innovation and possibility. Richard gave a speech about fostering entrepreneurship, calling me the future of tech leadership. 6 months ago, I'd been called selfish and ungrateful. The contrast was dizzying. Marcus approached during a quiet moment, tablet in hand. You need to see this, he said, pulling up security footage from our building's lobby. There on the screen were my parents, looking older and shabbier than I remembered, arguing with security. My mother clutched a manila envelope, while my father gestured angrily. The timestamp showed they'd been there for 3 hours that afternoon, waiting for me. Security followed protocol, Marcus assured me. They never made it past the lobby, but I thought you should know. The sight of them, diminished and desperate in our gleaming lobby, stirred complicated emotions I didn't want to examine during my triumph. I thanked Marcus and returned to the party, pushing down the part of me that wondered what was in that envelope. Later, Jenny would remind me that curiosity about our abusers is normal but dangerous. They're like emotional quicksand, she said. The more you engage, the deeper you sink. She was right, but the image of my parents' faces haunted me through the rest of the celebration. 2 days later, Grace called with an update on the criminal case. Your parents' lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. They're willing to plead guilty to lesser charges if you agree to victim impact limitations. I sat in my CEO office, a space larger than my first apartment, and processed this information. What does that mean exactly? Grace's sigh carried through the phone. They want to avoid jail time. In exchange, they'd accept responsibility, pay restitution, and agree to permanent no-contact orders. But they want you to agree not to speak publicly about the case. The offer was tempting. Criminal trials are exhausting, and the thought of testifying against my parents, of reliving every betrayal in court, made me nauseous. But the stipulation about silence rankled. They'd spent months assassinating my character publicly, and now they wanted to buy my quiet compliance? What do you recommend? I asked. Honestly? Take it. You'll get your vindication, they'll have criminal records, and you can move on with your life. Your success speaks louder than any victim impact statement could. I agreed to the plea deal with one modification. I retained the right to speak about my experiences in general terms, just not the specific criminal case. My parents accepted immediately, which told me they were more desperate than they'd appeared in the security footage. The signing was scheduled for the following week, and I tried to focus on my company rather than the impending final confrontation with the people who'd raised me. Ashley, meanwhile, was spiraling publicly. Her follower count had plummeted after the Ashley the Analyst debacle, and her content had shifted from lifestyle inspiration to increasingly unhinged rants about family loyalty and sibling jealousy. She'd started a GoFundMe for her legal trauma, claiming I'd ruined her life with false accusations. Someone, probably one of the tech Twitter crowd who'd adopted me as their success story, reported it as fraud, and it was removed within days. The universe has a twisted sense of humor because the day before the plea hearing, I received an email that would change everything. A documentary filmmaker named David Chen, who'd been following the rise of female tech CEOs, wanted to feature my story. Your journey from family scapegoat to successful founder is exactly the kind of narrative we need to highlight, he wrote. Would you be interested in participating? I stared at the email, understanding that this was bigger than my personal story. This was about every person who'd been told they were worthless by the people supposed to love them most. The plea hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I arrived early with Grace, wearing a simple black suit that projected competence rather than wealth. My parents were already there with their lawyer, and the sight of them hit harder than expected. My mother had lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by department store basics. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and his shoulders curved with defeat. For a moment, I saw them as they were. Aging people who'd bet everything on their golden child and lost. Ashley wasn't there, which surprised me until their lawyer mentioned she was serving her community service sentence. The drunk driving case had resolved with probation, community service, and a suspended license. The restaurant employees she'd injured were suing her civilly, and without my money to cushion her, she was facing bankruptcy. I felt nothing at this news, neither satisfaction nor sympathy. She'd become a stranger, whose poor choices had nothing to do with me. Judge Harrison reviewed the plea agreement methodically. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, do you understand that by accepting this plea, you're admitting to theft by deception and identity fraud against your daughter? My parents' yes was barely audible. And you understand this will result in permanent criminal records, restitution payments, and no-contact orders that, if violated, will result in immediate incarceration? Another whispered agreement. The judge turned to me. Ms. Morrison, do you accept these terms? I do, I said clearly. My mother flinched at the words, perhaps remembering when she'd said them at her wedding, promising to love and cherish, not knowing she'd one day steal from the daughter that union produced. The judge continued with legal formalities, but I watched my parents shrink further with each word. When he read the restitution amount, every penny they'd stolen plus penalties, my father's mask finally cracked. "How are we supposed to pay that?" he burst out. "We have nothing left." "That's not the court's concern," Judge Harrison said coldly. "You should have considered the consequences before committing fraud against your own child. The plea agreement includes a payment plan based on your income. If you fail to make payments, you'll be in violation of the agreement." He set the payment schedule, $500 monthly until the debt was satisfied. At that rate, they'd be paying until they died, a fitting metaphor for the weight of their choices. After signing the documents that legally sever my family ties, I stood to leave without looking at them. My mother's voice, broken and desperate, stopped me at the door. "Taylor, please. Just 1 minute. Let me explain." Against Grace's advice and my better judgment, I turned. "You have 30 seconds, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. My mother struggled to stand, her husband grabbing her arm to steady her. "We only wanted what was best for Ashley. She needed our help more than you did. You were always so strong." The courtroom fell silent as I processed this non-apology disguised as an explanation. "My strength wasn't permission to neglect me," I said quietly. "It wasn't an invitation to steal from me. And it certainly wasn't justification for choosing her over me every single day of my life. You weren't protecting Ashley. You were enabling her destruction and mine. The only difference is I survived it." I walked out while she was still forming words, Grace beside me like a protective shield. In the parking garage, I broke down completely, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of it being over. The legal battles were finished. The no-contact orders were permanent. They could never again show up at my work, my home, my life. Grace held me while I sobbed out 35 years of rejection and pain, then helped me clean up my face. "You did it," she said simply. "You stood up to them and won. Not many people can say that." The documentary filmmaker called that afternoon, and I agreed to participate. My story needed to be told, not for revenge, but for the thousands of people trapped in similar situations, believing they were selfish for wanting basic respect from their families. We scheduled the first interview for the following month, giving me time to process the plea hearing's emotional aftermath. I also needed to prepare for the inevitable extinction burst, the final desperate attempts at contact that always follow legal boundaries. It came faster than expected. 3 days after the hearing, packages began arriving at my office. Not threats, but gifts, the kind of thoughtful presents my parents had never given me as a child. Books about coding, expensive chocolates, a crystal paperweight engraved with "World's Best Daughter." Each came with a note in my mother's handwriting, variations on the theme of reconciliation and forgiveness. The security team intercepted them all, following the protocol we'd established. I never touched them, but their existence proved my parents still didn't understand. You can't buy back a relationship you actively destroyed. Ashley's extinction burst took a different form. She created a new Instagram account called Surviving Sibling Abuse, where she posted increasingly deranged content about being victimized by a jealous sister. She claimed I'd sabotaged her modeling career, stolen her business ideas, and turned our parents against her. The lies were so elaborate they'd almost be impressive if they weren't pathetic. Jenny monitored the account, so I didn't have to, reporting particularly egregious posts to Instagram for terms violations. The tech community rallied around me in ways I hadn't expected. When Ashley tried to crash an industry networking event I was attending, she was quietly but firmly removed by security who'd been briefed by other attendees. When my parents sent a rambling letter to the editor of TechCrunch trying to discredit their article about my company, the editor forwarded it to me with a note. "Thought you should see this. We won't be publishing it, obviously. Keep doing amazing work." The validation from professional peers meant more than family approval ever had. Marcus brought me coffee one morning with a bemused expression. "So your sister tried to apply for a job here," he said. "She listed you as a reference." I choked on my laugh. The audacity was breathtaking. Please tell me you're kidding. He pulled up the application on his tablet. There it was, Ashley's resume claiming she'd been a strategic advisor to my startup since its inception. Under references, my name and direct line. I take it we're not moving forward with her application? Marcus asked dryly. Forward it to legal, I said. Using me as a reference might violate the no-contact order. It did, resulting in a formal warning from the court to Ashley about respecting legal boundaries. She responded by posting a tearful video about being legally banned from supporting my sister's success. The comments were brutal, calling out her transparent manipulation. One commenter summed it up perfectly. Maybe if you wanted to support her success, you shouldn't have committed crimes against her first. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I was walking to my car after a late night at the office when I saw them. My parents stood by my car, clearly having waited for hours. My father looked defeated, but my mother had a wild energy that set off every alarm in my head. I immediately called building security, while keeping my distance. We just want to talk, my mother called out. Please, Taylor. We're your parents. You are my parents, I corrected, staying near the building entrance. Now you're people with restraining orders. Security is on the way. I suggest you leave before police arrive. My father tugged at my mother's arm, but she shook him off, stepping forward. You've destroyed our lives. We have nothing because of you. How can you live with yourself? The accusation was so backwards, I almost laughed. They destroyed their own lives chasing Ashley's illusions, and somehow I was responsible? Security arrived before I could respond, 2 guards who took the situation seriously. As they escorted my parents away, my mother turned back one last time. I wish I'd never had you, she screamed. You've brought nothing but misery to this family. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They were the final admission of what I'd always known. In their story, I was the villain for existing, for succeeding, for refusing to be their perpetual victim. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years, her cruel words freeing me from any lingering obligation to care about their opinions. 5 years have passed since that night in the parking garage. 5 years since my mother's final cruel words set me free from any lingering hope of reconciliation. I'm 40 now, a strange milestone that feels both significant and ordinary. My company went public last year, and the IPO was covered by every major tech publication, from family betrayal to billion-dollar valuation. The Taylor Morrison story ran in Forbes, complete with a cover photo of me in my office, surrounded by the team that helped build something extraordinary from the ashes of my old life. The documentary about my journey aired 2 years ago, winning awards and sparking a national conversation about family financial abuse. I still get emails from people who saw themselves in my story, who found the courage to set boundaries or leave toxic situations because they realized they weren't alone. The filmmaker, David Chun, became a friend through the process, and we're now working on a foundation that provides legal support to people escaping financial abuse from family members. My parents declared bankruptcy 3 years ago. I know this not because I keep tabs on them, but because it was public record when they tried to discharge the restitution debt. The court denied their request. Criminal restitution isn't dischargeable in bankruptcy. They're still paying $500 monthly, will be until they die. Ashley moved to Florida and married a man 30 years her senior who she met at the country club where she worked as an events coordinator. Her Instagram, under yet another new name, shows a carefully curated life that I suspect is as hollow as her previous personas. The success of my company led to opportunities one never imagined. I've spoken at major conferences about innovation, leadership, and overcoming adversity. Last month, I delivered the keynote at the Grace Hopper Celebration, the world's largest gathering of women in tech. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of faces, I thought about the girl who once sent money home from her 3 minimum wage jobs, believing that sacrifice would finally earn her family's love. That girl couldn't have imagined this life. Jenny remains my closest friend, though our relationship has evolved beyond crisis support to genuine sisterhood. She's now COO of my company, a role she's brilliant at, and the godmother to my daughter. Yes, I have a daughter, another plot twist I didn't see coming. Her name is Luna, and she's 2 years old, with curious eyes and a laugh that heals parts of me I didn't know were still broken. Her father is Marcus, my first hire, who became my best friend, then my partner, then my husband in a small ceremony attended only by chosen family. Our wedding was everything my family would have hated. Small, genuine, focused on love rather than appearance. Jenny walked me down the aisle because I chose to walk with someone who'd actually been there for me. My support group friends filled the venue with the kind of joy that comes from people who understand that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when life falls apart. Marcus's vows included a promise to never make me earn his love, and I ugly cried through the entire ceremony. Luna won't grow up the way I did. She'll never compete for our affection, never feel less than because a sibling needs more attention, never have her achievements dismissed or her struggles ignored. Marcus and I are intentionally creating a different kind of family, one built on respect and genuine love rather than obligation and manipulation. It's harder than I expected, unlearning 35 years of dysfunction, but therapy helps. Dr. Hernandez still sees me monthly, now focusing on parenting without repeating patterns. The money my parents stole seems insignificant now compared to what I've built. My net worth crossed into 9 figures with the IPO, wealth so abstract it barely feels real. But I remember being unable to afford name-brand pasta, and that memory keeps me grounded. The foundation I started has helped over 500 people escape financial abuse, providing legal support, emergency funds, and therapeutic resources. Every success story heals something in me, proof that breaking cycles is possible. Marcus found an article about my family last year. Ashley had started another GoFundMe, this time claiming she needed money for IVF treatments. The internet detectives quickly discovered she'd had 3 similar fundraisers in the past 2 years for different medical crises, none of which were verified. "Your sister's committed to the grift," Marcus observed. "You have to admire the consistency, if not the ethics." I didn't feel anything reading about her latest scheme. She'd become a stranger whose DNA I happened to share, nothing more. My book came out 6 months ago, The Price of Freedom, a memoir of family, fraud, and finding yourself. The publisher worried about potential legal issues, but my lawyer assured them that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Besides, my parents' criminal convictions are public record. The book tour was exhausting but cathartic, standing in bookstores telling my story to people who needed to hear that choosing yourself over toxic family isn't selfish, but necessary. One stop on the tour was in my hometown. I almost canceled, worried about potential confrontations, but my publicist had arranged heavy security. The bookstore was packed, faces I recognized from high school mixed with strangers. During the Q&A, someone asked if I ever regret my choice. "I regret that I had to make it," I answered honestly. "I regret that my parents couldn't love me for who I was instead of resenting me for who I wasn't. But I don't regret choosing my own life over their dysfunction." After the event, an older woman approached hesitantly. It was Mrs. Chun from next door, who used to sneak me cookies when my mother put me on diets Ashley wasn't subjected to. "I always knew something was wrong in that house," she said quietly. "I should have done more."
"I'm sorry."
I hugged her. This neighbor, who showed me more kindness than my blood relatives. "You gave a lonely kid cookies and a safe place to exist for a few minutes. That was everything." The book's dedication reads, "To everyone who chose themselves when their family wouldn't choose them, you deserve love that doesn't require you to shrink." It's sold over 1 million copies, with translations in 15 languages. The royalties go entirely to the foundation because I don't need the money, and others desperately do. Every week, I get letters from readers sharing their own stories of family betrayal and survival. I read every one. These confirmations that I'm not alone, that family toxicity is more common than we admit. Recently, I've been working with legislators on bills protecting adults from family financial abuse. It's shocking how few legal protections exist, how much the system assumes family members won't prey on each other. My testimony before Congress included the security footage of my mother stealing from my teenage savings account. This is what family financial abuse looks like, I said. A mother, smiling at a bank teller while she commits fraud against her own daughter. We need better laws because family doesn't mean safe. Luna is learning to talk, and her favorite word is why, which she applies to everything with exhausting persistence. Why sky blue? Why doggy bark? Why mama work? I answer as honestly as age-appropriate allows, determined to raise a child who questions the world rather than accepting dysfunction as normal. When she's older, I'll tell her about the grandparents she'll never meet, framing it as a story about boundaries rather than abandonment. Marcus handles the explanation admirably when people ask about grandparents. Luna has the family she needs, he says simply. His own parents, lovely people who welcomed me without question, fill the grandparent role beautifully. They never ask why my family isn't in our lives, respecting that some stories don't need to be retold. At Christmas, their house fills with chosen family, the support group friends who became siblings, Jenny who became the sister I actually wanted. The other day, Luna pointed at a photo from my wedding and asked, "Who dat?" It was a group shot of our chosen family, faces beaming with genuine joy. That's our family, I told her. The people who love us. She accepted this explanation with the easy confidence of a child who's never doubted her place in the world. Later, Marcus found me crying in the kitchen, overwhelmed by the simple beauty of raising a child who takes love for granted because she's never experienced its absence. I still have the restraining orders, renewed automatically now, a permanent legal barrier between my chosen life and the people who birthed me. Occasionally, word reaches me through the network of people I can't quite cut off. My parents still blame me for their circumstances. Ashley still schemes for quick money. The family story still paints me as the villain who destroyed them with my selfishness. Let them tell whatever story helps them sleep. I have work tomorrow, a daughter to raise, a husband who sees my worth, friends who celebrate my success, and a life built on truth rather than manipulation. My mother was wrong about me ending up alone. I'm surrounded by people who chose me as deliberately as I chose them, who love me not despite my success, but because of the person I became by claiming it. The family I was born into gave me an ultimatum: pay for sins I didn't commit or lose them forever. I chose freedom, and in losing them, I gained everything. They thought exile was a punishment, but it turned out to be the greatest gift they ever gave me. Not intentionally, of course. The only gifts they gave intentionally came with strings attached, and I've learned to live beautifully without their web of obligations. Looking back, I sometimes wonder who I might have been if they'd loved me properly. Maybe I'd have been content with less, never driven to prove my worth through achievement. Maybe I'd have married someone they approved of, lived a life that photographed well but felt empty. Maybe I'd still be sending money home, still showing up for holidays where my accomplishments were dismissed, still shrinking myself to avoid outshining Ashley. That alternate timeline exists somewhere, and I'm grateful every day that it's not mine. The price of freedom was everything I thought I couldn't live without. My family's approval, my identity as a daughter and sister, the hope that someday they'd see my worth. But freedom, it turns out, is worth any price. In choosing myself when they wouldn't choose me, I discovered that the love I'd been seeking externally existed within me all along. I just needed space from their voices to finally hear my own. And my voice, the one they tried so hard to silence, now speaks to millions through my company, my book, my foundation, and most importantly, in the bedtime stories I tell my daughter about brave girls who choose their own adventures. I'd love to hear your own stories of choosing yourself when family let you down. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between your well-being and family loyalty? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph over family adversity. Share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve love that doesn't require you to become smaller. Until next time, keep choosing yourself.